Hi, and welcome back to Today in Tech. I'm Ken Mingus, Executive Editor at Computer World. I'm here today with our Windows expert, Preston Growler, from various undisclosed locations in the United States. Quick reminder, if you're watching us on the Computer World LinkedIn Live page, please leave a question or comment for us. If you got questions for Preston while we're on the air, we'll try to get to them. If you're watching us on YouTube, please, as always, subscribe and play nicely in the comments if you have something to say. Preston, it's great to see you, even from a long distance. A
Yes,
lot has
same here.
happened since the last time we had a chance to talk about Windows.
Yes.
Obviously the pandemic, and you've got a column up that we posted this week on Computer World talking about how what's going on with the pandemic, maybe playing into or changing some of the things Microsoft may have already had in mind. Tell me a little bit more about what your thinking is there, and how you see this unfolding for Microsoft before we get into the Windows 10 questions.
Yeah, what I did is in that column is I looked at through the prism of specifically Windows, not Microsoft as a whole, but specifically what does the coronavirus mean for the future of Windows? And first, there's something simple, short term, and that is um, Microsoft typically once a month they issue a patch, and the patch might have bug fixes, a couple of minor features, maybe security patches in there too, maybe not. Because of the pandemic, because it's very hard for IT to keep everything running, patches are a little more difficult for them. Microsoft, for the foreseeable future, is saying no more regular patches, security patches only. So there'll be fewer patches that will help IT be able to keep up with things. And that's very short term. But most of the column and most of what I've been thinking about is what does the coronavirus mean long term for Microsoft? Now, you and I have talked a lot about what's the future of Windows. Everybody talks, asks questions about the future of Windows. And I've been saying for a long time, well, what you see today in Windows is what you're going to see tomorrow. But I think with the pandemic, that's going to change potentially drastically. And here's why. You know, the business world obviously has changed by the pandemic. People are working remotely, people are working from home. And recently, there was an earnings call with Microsoft about their earnings, and Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, talks to them. The first thing he said is he said, if you look at Teams, Microsoft's collaboration tools, including video, if you look at that, in January, there were 20 million users each day. By the end of April, that went up to 75 million users. Um, Now, what does this mean? Well, obviously, during the short term in the pandemic, people have had to change how they work quickly. They're going to turn to collaboration tools. Satya Nadella put it well. He said that in the last 2 months, we've seen 2 years of digital transformation. He went on to say, and what Microsoft is working to do now is to make remote everything possible. Now you could say, well, that's the pandemic. How long will that be? A year, maybe 2 years. So that's a blip. But I believe that Microsoft knows, as most of all of us has to come to terms with, it's not a blip. Um, we've had other pandemics that are smaller pandemics, MERS and SARS. Um, Pandemics are going to be in our future, maybe not as bad as this one, but certainly epidemics, certainly diseases that shut down maybe entire continents, maybe just cities. We have global warming, and in global warming, we've already had more powerful storms and more of them. And so, what all this means is disruption has become the new normal. I think that's what the working world has realized with this pandemic. This is the future. It is not a blip. This is the future. It's not going to be an everyday future, but it is, we have to live with disruption as being part of our normal working life. And that means businesses have to adjust to that. And that means technology has to adjust to that. And that means Windows has to adjust to that. And I think that ultimately what's going to happen is that collaboration tools and collaboration will be built directly into Windows. I think the first thing that will happen is that there will be some form of Teams that will ship as part of Windows. Microsoft did this with OneDrive. OneDrive is their cloud storage. It worked really well for the company. They gave a certain amount of cloud storage to people. If you want more cloud storage, you pay more. OneDrive has now become incredibly popular because of that. I believe they're going to do the same thing with Teams. So I think at first what's going to happen is it will be sort of tacked onto Windows, but I think over time it will be integrated directly into Windows. not necessarily only Teams, probably collaboration tools that we don't even imagine yet. But I think that's the future. For example, let's say the file system. Well, one of the important things you need to do is you need to share files with each other. For example, Microsoft years ago bought GitHub, which is a code repository. And the point of that, of course, is collaboration for any number of people with code repositories. Well, people need to share files with each other. It's not so easy to do that right now. So I can imagine file collaboration built into Windows at very, down at the Explorer level, way down at the file level. And so I think that's coming. And how it'll work, I don't know, but I think that eventually we're all going to be working not just for a company, but we have to think of department teams, sub-department teams, ad hoc teams, project teams. So I think that Windows eventually becomes a multi-user operating system, not a single user operating system. I don't think that means that people will share licenses and use the same version of the software as much as it means that built into Windows everywhere will be a way to collaborate with people. I think maybe it might be voice guided, instead of having to type in stuff, you might be able to actually use Cortana to do something useful for a change. You might say, launch my budget project team. And boom, it gets launched. So I think that eventually that is where Windows will go. How long it takes, I don't know. It certainly can't happen fast. But like I said, I think disruption is the new normal in business and in technology. So I think that's the future of Windows.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, because I think that one of the things we're learning now is that as companies have been forced to distribute their workforce and completely change business processes right and left, invest in a lot of software and invest in training, getting people up to speed for doing things like this. I find it hard to believe that all of that investment is just going to poof go away if and when the pandemic ends. And I agree with you that collaboration, we've seen a lot of that in computer world, a lot of interest in collaboration tools as companies are trying to figure out what's the best tool, how do they use it, what's coming next. And so I agree, the idea that Microsoft might build Teams into Windows, or at least integrate them in a way that makes more sense than the separate way they're done now,
Right.
I think makes a lot of sense. Let me switch gears real quick and just ask you, we're already into the first week of May, and presumably Windows 10 2004 will be out, we're assuming next week. We're not really expecting any major changes there. That's probably like the last release from the old world as opposed to the next release of the new normal, right?
Yeah, and what's kind of surprising about it is, and you're right, I'll talk a little bit in a minute or two about what's new. And what surprised me a little bit all along the development cycle, because I've watched the entire cycle, what surprised me is how minor an upgrade it is. Because remember, the last 6-month upgrade, Microsoft typically had been on twice-a-year upgrades. And we skipped one last time around. It was just kind of a service pack. So you would think that Microsoft would have a lot of new stuff because it's been an entire year. I think this might be the first time ever in Windows 10 that it's been an entire year rather than once every 6 months. And there's not a lot here. So now to the specifics. Cortana. Cortana has now been separated into its own app. So it runs in its own window. You can use it like any other app. You can resize it. You can move it around, all that kind of stuff. That's the main change to it. What that means, by the way, one good thing about that is that means that Microsoft will be able to update it not twice a year, but whenever they want. Whenever there's a Windows update, they could then update it instead of having to wait 6 months or an entire year. So that's one thing. The other thing that kind of surprised me is Microsoft actually made Cortana less powerful, not more powerful. It took away some features. It took away the consumer kind of features. It took away playing music, for example. It took away controlling your home. It can't do that stuff anymore, which really did surprise me. Now, Microsoft make a big deal saying, well, this is a step forward because now you'll be able to do more with Cortana. Now you'll be able to check your meetings, create new meetings, create to-dos, all that kind of stuff. Well, Cortana's been able to do that for at least 3 years. I mean, I thought, am I hallucinating? Have I misremembered something, to use a phrase an old president used to use? I mean, what's going on? So I did some research and I found Microsoft help documents from 2017, and all the things that Cortana is supposedly now can do, couldn't do before it was doing back at least as far as 2017. So I'm a little baffled by Microsoft's statement about that. So that's with Cortana. Now you have Cortana now is therefore completely separate now from search. So we think, okay, now Microsoft can do great new stuff with search, but it really has not done great new stuff with search. One potential good thing that Microsoft did is the way search works is that, I think it was with the last revision, I can't remember, but anyway, what it does is it's constantly indexing your hard disk to make search faster. And in this version of Windows, it watches out to see what you're doing on your PC. If you're using your PC for anything important, it'll stop that indexing, and supposedly it'll speed up your PC. I don't know if I don't do important things with my PC or what, but I haven't noticed any performance boost. So there's that too. The other thing that Microsoft said was new in search was that across the bottom of the screen, there would be icons for news and weather and all kinds of things like that. So if you want to get the latest news, you just have to click them. And that is somewhat new, although the truth is if you have the existing version of Windows, the latest version of it, Microsoft recently released an upgrade to that built that same feature in the existing version of Windows. So the truth is it's only new in the sense that it hasn't been in a version of Windows before, but if you have the current version of Windows, you have that in your search already. A few other things, Task Manager, for those who like to geek out, including yours truly. There are a few kind of nice things. If you've ever wanted to know the temperature of your GPU, you can do it.
You know, that I have to admit, I'm going to jump in and say I kind of like to do that too. I'm obviously an Apple guy, but on the Mac side, I've got this utility that tells me, like, you know, what RPMs my fans are blowing, and you know, the GPU temperature and the CPU temperature and all that stuff. I like that, so I can understand why that's a fun thing in Windows.
Oh yeah, I do it all the time, and I think people who love Windows and love technology love that kind of stuff too. The other thing, by the way, Task Manager does, it now shows you the type of your hard disk. It never showed that before. And do you really need to know it? Probably not, but and if you're in IT, you do need to know it, and so it's good for them. But I like it. I mean, that's to me one of those hidden fun things that I actually really like. Apart from that, there is some new things and settings that are nice. For example, for network settings, you can now see all the network settings that used to be kind of all over the place. You can now see them in one place. So, you know, not a lot of highlights here. And, you know, there is nothing big, nothing new, nothing big like Timeline, nothing like a feature that Microsoft had been working on called Sets, which would allow you to have applications in multiple tabs in the same application. Like, for example, in File Explorer, you could have a tab with Excel, a tab with Word, a tab with PowerPoint, a tab with whatever you want. So you could sort of work on a project type of basis so that you'd call up one document, every tab would have a different aspect of that document. It would have been great. Microsoft's been talking about it for years. It didn't do it this time around and had a whole year to do it. I can't imagine that it's going to live. I think it'll be dead. And I think right now, like we talked about a few minutes ago, with collaboration being so important, I think Microsoft has other things they want to do to Windows rather than put Sets in there.
You know, to go back to your earlier point too, I do wonder, you know, at a time when obviously Microsoft is not rolling out big wow features, it doesn't seem like the middle of a pandemic is the time you would want to be trying to do that either. You know, simplicity is a good thing.
Right.
And so I doubt we're going to see anything later this year, unless it is something around, you know, more collaborative apps or options for Windows users. Just to close the loop, so do we think the operating assumption is that Windows 10 2004 will be out on this month's Patch Tuesday?
That's what everybody seems to believe. It seems to be the time. Microsoft, it's certainly been done for a while. I've been using it for quite a while. And so who knows, of course, but I can't see a reason unless there's some weird last minute glitch that Microsoft won't release it then. But it seems to me like it makes plenty of sense.
Okay, good, got it. I was just checking in with Michelle Davidson, our social media guru. We do have a few questions. Some of these are going to probably fall into that too specific to answer category, but let me just fire these off to you real quick, and we can see if there's any insights you might have. Actually, this one just came in today, and somebody's asking, is there a VPN solution that we can expect from Microsoft?
That's an interesting question. And, I think that that falls under the kind of collaboration features that we were talking about recently. It would not surprise me in the least to see it coming. Now, I don't know when it would come, but actually, I hadn't thought of that. Whoever asked that question, thank you. I wish I had heard it a while ago. I would have included it in my column. But I think that it almost seems inevitable right now. No one can guarantee it, but it certainly seems like the right thing to do, especially given that Microsoft expects that much more collaboration. You would think that they would want to include a VPN tool in Windows.
Right, I agree. A couple of questions. These were left with us earlier, so this is sort of pre-pandemic, I think. But somebody writes in saying, immediately after upgrading to Windows 10 from Windows 7 using the digital license, my built-in webcam stopped working. Any solution to this? And this is somebody that's using an HP Elite, I guess, laptop.
Yeah,
Not a good time. Not a good time for your webcam to stop working if you're doing remote work. I can assure you. So I'm sure they've got a crisis here.
Yeah, I feel so. I do feel for that person. I don't know what can be done about it, and the reason I don't know is that we've talked about this before. Ken, Windows runs on a zillion different kinds of computers that have a zillion different kinds of add-ins and hardware, different drivers, even different versions of the same device. And because of that, we can't answer a question like that. I will say one thing though, which is that whenever you upgrade to a big upgrade from like Windows 7 to Windows 10, that's a sort of a big jump up in your operating system. And whenever you do that, you are risking your hardware, your printer, your scanner, your video cam, I mean, name it, whatever piece of hardware you have, you're risking it not working, because a lot of times when they go to the newest version of Windows, they drop support for some old hardware. Now, I don't know if this person's webcam is old or not, but it wouldn't surprise me if either support was dropped or something like that. So that would be my guess. So one thing to take away from this is, in a time of pandemic, like you say, don't upgrade your operating system if you have hardware that needs to work. Now, one thing that did strike me is to this person is go into Device Manager, and you could do that. Go into the search box, type in Device Manager. You should see a link to Device Manager. And if you go through Device Manager, look for that device. It probably will be there, and it might have sort of like a little red symbol next to it that says it doesn't work. There's a lot of different things you could do. The first thing you could do is right-click it, and that often will let you update its driver. So
Got it.
I would try that. I would try updating the driver. It's almost certainly a driver problem. I can't guarantee it's a driver problem, but it's almost certainly a driver problem. And the other thing to do would be go to the website of the manufacturer of that webcam and go to the driver section and see if they have a Windows 10 driver. And if they do, download that driver and then install the new driver. That's your best bet.
Yeah, I was actually going to suggest the same thing, that sometimes you just have to go to the manufacturer and see if there's an updated driver that might replace the one that is no longer working. It's interesting because Michelle had just noted that in addition to that question, there are a number of people asking the same kind of questions, and related to webcams in particular. And it's very possible that, they didn't use their webcam before, didn't need to use the webcam before. And now all of a sudden they're working from home, they have to do meetings, and the webcam isn't working, and they're trying to suss it out. So there's your advice, check for drivers, check Device Manager, see if you can figure it out from there, and probably hold off on doing some updates right now until you make sure everything works properly.
I would absolutely. In fact, you know what, that brings us up to the update probably coming next week. It's a minor enough update that my recommendation to everybody, especially that you want to make sure everything keeps running, is don't go to it. I mean, in a time where your computer is your link to the world, I wouldn't upgrade anything.
Got it. Understood. One other question that, and again, I think this is going to fall into sort of the too specific for us to be able to answer, but one viewer writes in, I had Office 365 free version with my Lenovo laptop. Now, after reinstalling Windows 10, I'm unable to access Office 365 desktop version. Can you help? There are probably a
Uh,
lot of companies like you to be able to help if you could figure that one out.
yeah, same answer as before. It's, the Windows, operating system, the Windows world, the Windows environment, too complex. I do, as I think about it, though, I do have one recommendation, which is, uh, the sit, the version of Windows, the version of Office 3 of, well, is this Office, if your version of Office is not actually Office 365, but is actually just the sort of the license, the perennial license version, whatever Microsoft is talking about, it calls it these days. In other words, there's two versions of Office. One version of Office is you buy it for a certain amount of money, and you get to use it forever, and you never have to pay another penny. The issue with that sounds great, except that it means you also get no new features from Office 3 Office. So I'm not a big fan of that. I really like Office 365 because you pay a subscription, you install it on as many devices as you want, and in addition to that, it's constantly upgraded. So to this person, if you had what they call the perennial license of Office, my suggestion would be bite the bullet and subscribe to Office 365, and then you'll be able to get it. And check,
Got it.
check also, maybe you were subscribed to Office 365, so maybe you had a key around somewhere or something like that. Maybe, check with Microsoft with their help, maybe send an email, maybe it was tied to an email address, try to find that license key in some way if you possibly can. And if not, you might just be forced to get a new version of Office. And if you do, like I said, I strongly suggest Office 365 subscription rather than the whatever Microsoft calls sort of the one-shot deal version of Office.
Got it. Okay. And one last question. This one's actually coming from me, and then I will have to let you go. But lately, Microsoft has been talking about rebranding Office 365 and making it Microsoft 365 for some versions. And, we've been talking about it in house about, Office is such a well-known brand. Why would Microsoft sort of want to muddy the waters in terms of confusing people around Office 365, Microsoft 365? Any idea or thoughts what's going on there, or is this just Microsoft being Microsoft?
Yeah, one word, stupidity. I mean, honestly, I have never come across a company that did such a spectacularly bad job of branding. Microsoft does this all the time. This is not new. Microsoft does this every chance it could get. And it's even worse than that they had a brand called Office 365, and now they're calling it Microsoft 365. As it turns out, they are still going to use the word Office 365, but for the enterprise versions of Office. So now you'll have Office 365 and Microsoft 365, except Microsoft 365 will be one version of Office 365, and Office 365 will be another version of Office 365. I don't get it. I don't know what's going on. I never know what's going on with Microsoft when it comes to branding. My expectations is it'll remain completely muddled for a long time, and then they'll figure it out. I don't know. I've actually talked to one of the Microsoft editors, Val Potter, about this. And Val and I have frequently lamented how Microsoft does this. Partly we've lamented it because that's our job to bring clarity to confusion. And we can't do that with Microsoft branding. You can't make it clear. It can't be done. But I don't get it either.
Okay, so for people who may have seen some of those stories, and we are still looking into it, who may be confused, then that's okay
Right.
because it's confusing. Got it. Understood.
If you're
Okay,
confused, you're smart. Yeah, it means you get it.
exactly. Okay, well, Preston, I should let you go. I've got another meeting, believe it or not, to go
Okay.
to in this new normal world that we're in. But it's great to hear from you and get some advice on Windows and Microsoft in particular. Obviously, we will do this again.
Yep.
So thanks for being here, first of all.
Great. Thanks for
Uh,
having me.
Sure, absolutely. Again, as a reminder, if you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. You can leave some comments, questions for us there. Same thing if you're looking at us on the Computer World LinkedIn Live page, please follow the page. Coming up next week, Juliet on Today in Tech is going to be talking with John Gold from Network World about healthcare and IoT, which is obviously a big topic right now. You definitely want to check back on that. I believe that's coming up next Wednesday. So for now, I think that'll do it. Again, thanks, Preston, for being here. I'm Ken Mingus from Computer World. Check back with us again next time for another episode about Windows 10, and we'll answer some more questions. Thanks for watching.